Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Sporting Fan Podcast. Today's topic is a pretty obvious one if you're a Rugby League fan, and that is because I'll be speaking about State of Origin. Got a little bit into the history of State of Origin for those that don't know. It basically came about after it used to be essentially the residence team. So basically, if you were playing your footy in Queensland, you played for Queensland. If you played your footy in New South Wales, you played for New South Wales. So it was basically exactly that. You're based on residence, not where you're from. Even if and that would even mean if you're from the other state. And so you had players that were like, I want to play for and basically it came about because blokes basically said, I want to play for my home state. I don't want to be like, if I'm a New South Welshman, I want to play for New South Wales. If I'm a Queensland, I want to play for Queensland. So that's why they brought in Origin. A classic example of this was of the residence rule was one of the all-time greats, Artie Beetson, who was born in Roma in Queensland, but because he, majority of his career played in Sydney. He started his career at the Balmain Tigers, and he moved across to the Sydney Roosters, then known as Eastern Suburbs. He played for New South Wales for majority of his career, as he was a New South Wales resident. It is often spoken about that he's a Queensland great, but he actually played 18 times for New South Wales, and he only played three times for Queensland once State of Origin came about. So he's actually, if you actually really look at it, he's played 6 times the amount of games for New South Wales. He's more of a New South Wales great than a Queensland great if you actually really look at it. Situations like this were also one of the reasons that this was brought in so that people could play for their home state. But one of the other reasons that they was brought in is that what was then known as the NSWRL, which is now the NRL, had a lot of the best players playing in the competition simply because, Sydney, back in those days, a lot of blokes had a second career. They had a career outside of work, and, Sydney had a lot bigger market in terms of if you're a professional that also played rugby league, to get on, you basically had to work in Sydney or Melbourne, and obviously Melbourne has, back then, didn't have a team in the competition, and and also New South Wales had, the New South Wales Rugby League teams had more money, so they were able to pay more to get those players. So, New South Wales essentially had all the best players from New South Wales as well as Queensland. So, and they were always, New South Wales nearly always won. Like, there was a time there where New South Wales residents actually won 19 series in a row prior to Origin. Queensland just couldn't win. So they wanted to level up this Origin a bit. So the competition a bit, so that, blokes, the best Queensland players could actually play for Queensland, and the best New South Wales players could play for New South Wales. So basically, as time went on though, the rules, like anything, the rules got bent, and it actually became a bit of a running joke that it kind of went the other way, where it seemed like you basically only needed to have a holiday in Queensland, and in some cases you didn't even need that. You just needed a 10th cousin 20 times removed to play for Queensland. And you may have not even never actually played a game in Queensland, or if you're a New South Wales representative coming right through up the ranks and you played a game in Queensland, you're eligible to play for Queensland. It just got to the stage where it was a joke, and and there's actually it actually inspired a song called "That's in Queensland," which basically pokes fun at Queensland for selecting all these players that weren't actually from Queensland. Blokes such as Billy Moore, Greg Inglis, Israel Folau, and the list goes on and on. And even Brad Thorne. Brad Thorne's the classic joke where he, born and raised in New Zealand, played for the All Blacks in rugby union, and then plays for the Maroons in Australia in Rugby League, which kind of, puts the point in really there. And then, so you had, you had the famous Queensland streak, in 2006 to 2017, where they only lost that one series in 2014. However, as it was pointed out, they had times where there was like 6 and 7 of the best players weren't from Queensland. They were either from, New South Wales, New Zealand, one of the Polynesian countries, as well as PNG. They weren't actually from Queensland. And, that obviously angered a lot of New South Wales supporters because, it's not really state of origin if, a third of the team's actually not from Queensland. And a lot of the best players should have been playing for New South Wales, like, Israel Folau when he played rugby league, as well as Greg Inglis. They should have really been playing for New South Wales. Greg Inglis is from, the mid-north coast. He's from just north of Taree, I believe. He's from, just, I can't remember the town, but it's just north of Taree, and then Israel Folau is from Minto, the southwest of Sydney there. So, they should have really been playing for New South Wales, and but this also eventually the NRL actually did tighten it up, where I believe you have to live in that state before your 13th birthday, or you had to be basically a child of someone that was a former Maroon to be able to play for alternatively New South Wales player. So if you're born and raised in Queensland, but your father played for New South Wales, or vice versa, you're born and raised in Queensland and your father played for the Maroons, you are able to play for the other state. This was famously brought to light when Cronulla Sharks winger Renato Miltalo was picked to play for Queensland last year, and then he was then either on the night before the game or on the day itself, New South Wales put a complaint in to the NRL saying, he's from Auckland, New Zealand, he didn't move to Australia until his late teens. I believe he was 17, I believe, when he moved to Queensland, and his parents are Queenslanders. I believe one of his parents is Samoan, and I think his other parent is either American or what have you, American Samoan or something like that. But either way, they're not Queenslanders. And so, actually, on the day itself, just before his debut, he was ruled ineligible to play for Queensland. A lot of New South Wales fans would have been happy if this rule was around in a lot earlier than what it was, because obviously, Greg Inglis would have been playing for New South Wales and terrorising Queensland instead of being the highest try scorer ever. So, it would have been nice to have him playing for New South Wales and dominating for New South Wales for, how long was it? About 12, 13 years. Yeah, it would have been really nice to have him playing for New South Wales. But onto the actual game itself, there has been a lot of talk around selections, especially the selection of Daniel Tupou over Josh Adokar. Selecting Jack Wyden in the centres with Stephen Crichton on the bench, and the non-selections of both Jake Trbojevic and Angus Crichton. Personally, like what others have said, I don't think Wyden will actually start the game as much as he's been selected to, and Greg Alexander, who's a I don't know what his role is with New South Wales, but he's basically one of the assistants, and he said that he will start, but I can see Stephen Crichton starting the game, and I think Whiten will come off the bench as utility. Whiten has played his best Origin when he comes on with tiring defence around that 30-minute mark, 10 minutes before half time, that 5 to 10 minute period before half time. He'll come in and dominate. It showed last year when he in the 2020 series. It showed last year as well as in the 2020 series that they that's where he played his best. When he played in the centres. In 2020 he played at centre, I should say, and he looked out of position. He looked a bit lost, and Queensland really dominated that series. They just ran through him and Clint Gutherson, and they just ran through them and ran riot. So I think they'll start Crichton at centre and put Whiten back to the bench. With Josh Adokar, it's a hard one, but I think he's been a bit of a victim of the club doing so poorly. When he was at Melbourne, he was one of the best finishers in the game, and he still is. However, he's not really getting the ball in a good situation. I know he scored 8 tries this year, which puts him in the top 10 try scorers this season, but other than actually finishing, he hasn't actually got the ball that much. He has only really been running straight out of dummy half, and he's finishing the try. The Dogs seem to have not been able to give him the ball where it's basically anything other than a dummy half run or a try scoring situation. Like the bloke that replaced them, Daniel Tupou, the Roosters don't just, it's not just that, him running out of his own end and kicking at the end of the sets, trying to get him to do that leap that he does and score. Like with Daniel Tupou, the Roosters use him a little bit more than just in those two situations. They try to get him in the game a little bit more. So Josh Adokar is trying to get into the game as much as he can, but the way the Bulldogs are playing, they're not really getting him in, so it's really affecting his game. And I think he still looks quick, but he just doesn't look as quick as what he was in previous season. There has been talk that one of the main reasons why Tupou got picked over Josh Adokar is because of his height, and he's one of the best in the air in the NRL. While Josh Adokar is okay in the air, but with his height, the worry that the Queensland wingers will get over him. With the New South Wales selectors were worried that Xavier Coates would get over him and dominate. Personally, I'd be surprised if Josh Adokar doesn't play some kind of role this series. I wouldn't be surprised if he's brought in game 2 or 3. But, obviously we'll see whether he does or not. I do hope that Daniel Tupou does do a good job, though. So hopefully the selection does, come off that. Not selecting Josh Adokar doesn't come back to bite New South Wales bad on the backside, and hopefully he does do well. I think it will be a good contest between Coates and Tupou. Coates is obviously a good up-and-coming player. He's been good for a number of years. Another bloke, that's in Queensland, via PNG. But yeah, he is a great player, and I hope it'll be a good contest seeing those two go at it. With the non-selection of Jake Turbo, I think he's a bit like Josh Adokar. He's been a good player for New South Wales for a number of years now, but he seems to be struggling a bit at Manly. He seems to have been struggling a bit even when his brother Tom hasn't been even when Tom was there, he was struggling. As a result, Brad Fittler decided to cut him, and I think he might find it hard to get back into the Blues team, simply because the Blues have so many good back rowers at the moment to pick from. So he would really need to pick up his game to push his way back into the team. There was talk that he was going to play in the play him as a front rower, but personally, I think if it happened, it wouldn't work because he hasn't got the size and he hasn't got that fear factor that other front rowers have. For example, they've selected Junior Paulo and Payne Haas is starting, as well as Regan Campbell-Gillard off the bench. So he just doesn't have that size and fear factor and that authority about him of a front rower that those blokes do. So his game is more of a ball playing back rower than a dominant pushing, bashing up forward front rower. I know Jason Tamalolo is that kind of back row where he just smashes it up. Just Jake Trbojevich's game isn't that. It'll be interesting to see what he does do now, whether he can lift his game to get back in. And I hope he does, because he seems like everyone says he's the nicest bloke ever, but he's struggling a bit this season. The other bloke that got left out is Angus Crichton. He was a bloke that has done a lot of, again, like Jake Trbojevic and Josh Adokar, has been in and around the team for a number of years now. He has done a good job for New South Wales. This year, he's performed a little bit better than Jake Trbojevic, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased that I'm a Roosters supporter, but he's been very hit and miss this year. He's just been he's had these games where he looks like, he's going to absolutely destroy teams, and he does. And then he has other games where he's a bit weak. You just look at the Roosters game and go, oh, is Angus Crichton playing? And then you just see him 30 minutes into 40 minutes, or only in the second half, and he was actually starting the game. You barely see him get the ball in the first 30 minutes. So he's a bloke where he's been, very hit and miss, like I say, and he's a bloke that could potentially feature this season. He's probably got a better case than Jake Trbojevic, but I think if there was going to be one change, it'll probably be him coming in. Who for? I don't know. Whether it be an injury or they just drop someone. I'm not sure, but he would be one bloke that would likely to come in if it was out of the three blokes I mentioned. It'd be him and Adokar would be the top two that might come in, and unfortunately Jake Trbojevic might struggle a bit to get back in. There have been a couple of forced changes in the New South Wales squad. Both centres from last year, Latrell Mitchell and Tom Trbojevic, brother of Jake, are both out injured. Mitchell should be back playing at the latest game 3. Maybe back playing for South before game 2 of the Origin series, whereas Turbo's out for the years. So he won't be unfortunately be back. But I am interested to see how Katoni Staggs will go, because he's been playing for the Broncos he's been playing extremely well for the Broncos for a number of years now. Even when they were underperforming, he was quite a standout. In 2020 when they got the wooden spoon, and they were Broncos were pretty ordinary last year when they were down near the bottom of the table. He was the one bloke that really stood up frequently. I think it'll be interesting to see how he links up with the halves. But I think he will do a great job. He seems he seems to read game pretty well. And he seems to be full of energy. And I hope he can do a few of those big runs that he does. For the Broncos. Like, he seems to be deceptively strong, and he's extremely quick. Like, there seems to be a lot of blokes that are, right on top of him, and you think, oh yeah, this is going to be an easy one-on-one tackle, but then he just runs over them, and these are like even blokes that are good defenders. He just seems to just push them off very easily, and because of his speed as well, he's able to get round blokes and as well as use his strength. So, I reckon Jerome Luai and Nathan Cleary, I reckon, will give him a lot of early ball if they can get that roll on, and if they can get him early ball, he's going to cause a lot of problems for defenders, and he's going to I reckon he could cause a lot. I reckon Queensland is going to be struggling to handle him. Gagai, they got Gagai and Holmes in the centre, so they'll have to be right on their game to. I'm not sure which side of the field he'll be lining up against, but they all have to be right on their game to be able to take him down, bring him down, because any misstep he would just make them look silly. The other centre that has been picked, as mentioned, is Jack Wyden, but it's more likely that Stephen Crichton will be starting. I personally think Crichton will be starting. Like I said earlier, Wyden is more effective at the bench. He's played he's more of a 5'8", and he's played that utility role for New South Wales before, and he's done it very, very well. Whereas Stephen Crichton, he's more of just an out-and-out centre. I know he can play fullback, but he's a better centre, and he's got that link with Jerome Luai and Nathan Cleary at club level, where they played together for a number of years, both in the juniors as well as at first grade at Penrith. So I think, personally, I'd be more surprised if they don't start Cleary. They have that switch before kickoff. The reason, and that's a big thing with Origin, is having those combinations. They have those combinations. So I think it'd be just silly if you break that, and because I know where it is. So yeah, I think it could be, and I think Crichton running off those two, like Luai and Cleary, will be very damaging. And I think this is where it's going to be won and loss. I'll speak about the benches later, where I think New South Wales has got a better bench, but I think the centres are where it's going to be won and lost, simply because which team can get their centres early ball, simply because we all know what Holmes and Gagai can do for Queensland, because they've been playing for Queensland for a number of years now, and they've always stepped up for Queensland. And while the New South Wales centre pairing they're only new, but they want to hold down their spots. They don't want to be dropped, and they don't want, as much as Latrell Mitchell's coming back, they want to be saying to Latrell Mitchell, you have to be exceptional to get back into this team, because they don't want to leave the door slightly ajar to open up, because if the door's slightly ajar, Latrell Mitchell's just gonna run through that like a freight train. So they just want to have that door firmly shut, so Latrell Mitchell doesn't come in, because Latrell Mitchell's one hell of a player. So to keep their spot, they have to play like their lives depended on it. And like I said, I think the bench is going to be a crucial part of the game. Simply because I don't think there's much in it in the starting 13. Both teams look pretty even on paper. So the benches will be important. And personally, I think New South Wales has a better bench than Queensland. Again, a little bit biased because I am from New South Wales. I'm not a Sydney sider, but yes, I think Queensland are just that little bit lacking there. Yes, they have Harry Grant there, who will play a big role for Queensland, like he did last year when he came on off the bench. And he will have an impact when he comes on. So his utility position is probably the one spot on the bench that Queensland are better at. They've got the wood over the New South Wales, but the other three bench players I think are better for New South Wales. I just think they give that little bit extra, which is what is needed in Origin. You can usually tell when the bench comes on because the flow of the game changes. I think when the New South Wales bench comes on, they will slot straight in, and as if they were the starting team. Whereas with Queensland, I think their bench might take a few minutes to get warm up to the game and see the speed of the game, and this might give an opportunity to for Luai and Cleary to get blokes like Tony Staggs and Stephen Crichton one-on-one with defenders, which will be hard for defenders because, as I said, at club level they've just made defenders look silly, and they've just run over total blokes. The one bloke I think that could be a bit of a wild card and a bit of a what sometimes can be considered the joker in the pack. I reckon it might be Ryan Madison. Like a lot of blokes, a lot of people are focusing on other people, but I think he might be a bit of a the joker because he just when you just see his ball skills, he's got very, very because he played as a 5'8" when he was younger. He's got very good ball skills, but he's also a very, very strong. He's got a very strong run game, and he's a big body. And I think that he could cause a few problems, or not a few. I reckon he could cause a lot of problems for Queensland if they give him any space and time to move. I reckon he's been, flying a little. He hasn't been spoken a lot. He's been spoken a bit because he's on debut, but I reckon he's going to be one bloke that could really, cause some problems, and I reckon he could be a bloke that could really have a strong game. And as much as it's like I said, it's his debut, I reckon, Queensland might need to do the homework on him and really need to get him down quickly. Otherwise, he's just going to wreak havoc. He's going to have a field day out there. And there's one thing that we probably won't see in this game, unfortunately, which I'd love to see. But unfortunately, we probably won't see a good old-fashioned all-in. Some might say that's a good thing. Saying that they're playing rugby league, not boxing. But it's different when it comes to Origin. State of Origin is more than just a game. It's all about the state pride, getting one over on the other state. I just get sick of, there's one thing I hate is when, and it doesn't matter what level of footy it is that you see these blokes running in from the other side of the field and they just grab a jersey. It's just like, for fuck's sake, you're running from 30 metres. Like, either don't run in or fucking punch the dickhead. Like, if you run all that way, why waste all that energy, you know? Wait, bloody do something. Just, you know, if you're going to run in, bloody start throwing. And, like, the thing is, if there's 6 or 7 blokes from each team, so there's 12, like, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15 blokes throwing punches, they're not going to send them all off. Like, let's be real. They're not going to send bloody more than half the bloody players off. So if you see your teammate throwing punches, just stop freaking throwing punches. They're not going to bloody send you all off. Like, that's what I don't understand. Like, you know, just bloody start throwing punches, give the people what they want, and it'll make the game so much more interesting, and people would love it. Like, you know, obviously they don't want it just to become obviously they don't want it to become a boxing thing where there's punch-ups every 3 minutes, but, you know, they do want it where, you know, let their energy out. You know, if it happens in the first 10 minutes, okay, just go, the referee calls them out, say, you know, you've had your fun, now let's get on with it. Yeah, and I reckon it would give a lot of feeling in the game if they could do it. And the other reason why I think they should be allowed to do it is because too often blokes get, you know, they do these little niggly things and they push a bloke and, you know, and they just keep niggling because they know they're not going to, you know, get hit. Like, if they brought back the biff and said, you know, they'll get a lot of that grubby stuff out, I think, and this is not just, you know, I know I'm moving a little bit away from the state of origin here, but, and I'm talking about the game, the whole game, the whole rugby league, at the moment, not a state of origin, but a lot of that niggly stuff that happens is really amplified since they stopped the biff after, you know, that Paul Gallen and, when Paul Gallen belted, Nate Miles, that was I believe 2013. Ever since then, like, this niggly stuff has really taken over the game, and a lot of people don't like it, and you can't really penalise it, but it didn't happen before, simply because blokes knew that they were going to get hit. So, if you brought back the bib, people wouldn't do it. So, I reckon it will be, that's one thing that I think the NRL should allow just for Origin. Yeah, I reckon, but tonight, I reckon it'll be a really great game. I really hope New South Wales just gives it to Queensland. I hope it's a win for New South Wales. I don't really care if they win by 1 point or 100 points, as long as New South Wales win. So go New South Wales. I look forward to hearing who you're going for. Hopefully, majority of you are supporting New South Wales, but if you're supporting Queensland, you know, good luck to you guys. I hope you, but in saying that, I hope you lose. So, until next time, thanks for listening, and I'm always open for your feedback. So, make sure you give me some feedback as well, please. Love interacting with you guys. Thanks, and see you later.